Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Ukraine Crisis Media Center continues its work, and now I give the floor to Mr. Alexander Hook, Principal Deputy Chief Monitor of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine, with weekly reports about the situation in the east of Ukraine. Mr. Hook, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Last week, there was a 25% decrease in the number of ceasefire violations recorded by the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission compared to the previous week. Daily ceasefire violations fluctuated, varying from 200 to over 1,000 a day. The SMM also recorded 80% fewer explosions assessed as caused by the use of weapons that should have been withdrawn in accordance with the Minsk agreements. In total, the mission recorded the use of such weapons on 33 occasions, 28 artillery and 5 mortar rounds, compared to about 180 the week before. In addition, the OSCE SMM recorded over 1,000 explosions from weapons whose type could not be determined. 80% of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission recorded violence occurred in the Avdiivka-Yasinowata Donetsk airport area and in the areas south of Svetlodarsk. Last week, compared to the previous week, there was in fact a 70% increase in the number of ceasefire violations recorded in the Avdiivka-Yasinowata Donetsk airport triangle. There was, on the other hand, an almost 50% reduction in the level of violence in areas south of Svetlodarsk. This area had in the previous week seen a particularly high number of instances in which Minsk-proscribed weapons were used, about 160, with only 2 instances recorded last week. Last week, the OSCE SMM continued to document the suffering caused by the use of such weapons. In Dokuchaevsk, we confirmed that 6 civilians had sustained injuries as a result of the fighting. On the night of 28th to 29th January, the SMM camera in Donetsk filtration station recorded a series of ceasefire violations. In one particular episode, as can see here on this footage from an SMM camera at the facility, you can see a projectile hitting the building where a camera was installed. The camera remained operational. The camera is close to another building in the facility where chlorine is stored. A direct hit on the chlorine storage could spell environmental disaster with health implications for the civilian population in the surrounding urban areas. The use of weapons in urban areas and in places where large numbers of people gather has indeed been a regular feature of this conflict. Last week, our monitors confirmed the death of a 57-year-old man who had been killed in Olenivka on 21st of January. Last week, the OSCE SMM observed on a daily basis hundreds of civilians queuing at entry-exit checkpoints, including the one near Olenivka. Last week, the SMM also saw 2 civilians, a man aged 20 in non-government controlled Donetsk city and a man aged 30 from government controlled Verkhno-Toretske. Both had sustained injuries from unexploded ordnance. The SMM continued to observe weapons in violation of withdrawal lines, 23 in government-controlled areas and 3 in non-government controlled areas. Here, for example, you can see what an SMM unmanned aerial vehicle spotted near so-called LPR-controlled Obozne. 2 T-64 main battle tanks just 2.7 kilometers from the contact line, both in violations of the agreed withdrawal lines. And in this image here, also taken by an OSCE SMM unmanned aerial vehicle last week, you can see 4 self-propelled howitzers very close to the government-controlled village of Oleksandropil. They were 22.3 kilometers from the contact line, again in violation of agreed withdrawal lines. Dear friends, as is evident by now, and from what I have just outlined, the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission establishes and reports facts. Facts that measure the intensity of the violence and the level of compliance with agreements signed by the sides. Facts that measure the human cost. Facts that are a barometer showing at what stage of the cycle of violence we are in. Facts that are vitally important to decision makers and policy makers who ultimately decide on a way forward, a way that allows this violence to end. To the casual reader, often faced with a torrent of information, there is, however, a tendency not to look behind the facts. There are a lot of facts. Facts about the direction of fire, number of explosions, number of casualties, length of time civilians have been without water, electricity or gas, number of type of weapons observed in violations of withdrawal lines. Facts that for many readers fail to breathe life. Lots of facts that perhaps fail to convey the daily reality of life and in many instances the daily reality of death in eastern Ukraine. Given the size of Ukraine, the complexity of the situation, let alone the complexity of the lives of millions of people living there, the scarcity of resources and time constraints. Keep in mind we issue a report almost every day. It is inevitable that our reports are a collection of raw facts. They are also specifically designed to be fact-based. For many people outside Ukraine, OSCE SMM daily reports often represents the only factual source on what is happening on the ground. There is a stream of information, sometimes a flood, coming from the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, much of it, though, simply little more than propaganda. There are many brave and trusted journalists, and many of them face threats, restrictions, and even death as they try to uncover the truth and get to the facts of life in eastern Ukraine. Often media outlets representing a particular view or even persons or group of people outnumber outlets dedicated to news and impartial reporting. It is a complex media landscape. We in the SMM, along with the OSCE Special Representative on the Freedom of Media, have long tried to report on. Freedom of the media is not only a pillar of the OSCE, but it is also a pillar of democratic existence, which is not only essential to the maintenance of peace, but perhaps also to its restoration. SMM reports in this context gain an even greater importance. Facts matter. They are critical to any understanding and in turn to a resolution of the conflict. It is the core of the SMM mandate, monitoring, reporting, and informing decision and policymakers across the 57 OSCE participating states. It will, I believe, be the difference between war and peace. I hope it will sometimes lead to this conflict being ended. Dear friends, for this reason, the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission will continue to insist on establishing facts and reporting only what we have established. Speculation is not in our mandate. I would, however, like to remind readers, and media in particular, that behind every fact reported there is a story. It is, I would suggest, time to start reading between the lines. Time to realize that there are millions of human beings affected. And while facts are dry and clinical, they in many ways tell individual and collective stories. With every shell counted, there are as many, if not more, human stories. If every 10,000 civilian crossing the contact line, there are 10,000 stories of human endurance, dignity, and suffering. For every weapon observed, there are many more human lives shattered. While people, real people, are invariably more than a collection of facts, their stories cannot be truthfully told without facts. Facts matter because people matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. Now it's time for questions. Your colleagues, if you have questions, you're welcome.
Crimean News Agency. It was reported recently the Ukrainian armed forces took control in Lugansk region the villages of Novoalexandrivka and Katerinivka. Are you aware of this information and whether you have dispatched a patrol to these particular areas? Can you comment on the situation on the ground?
Thank you for the question. We are aware of allegations that Ukraine armed forces has moved into the village. We have not, however, been able to confirm this information, as our patrols have recently been unable to access the village, as there are known booby traps, hazards, and the only approach to the road to the village is contaminated. We have though received information from various interlocutors inside the village suggesting that Ukraine armed forces has indeed moved into the village. I can also tell you that our monitors at the Kadivka 4 patrol base last night, in less than an hour and a half, recorded over 100 explosions, which they assessed as coming from the vicinity of Novoalexandrivka. Based on previous experience, we know that forward moves are accompanied by upsurges in violence. Any finding that our patrols will make, should they access that village, will be made public in our daily reports available on our website in Ukrainian, English, and Russian languages. Thank you.
Thank you. More questions? Oh, one more. Questions.
Regarding the situation on the restoration of mobile communication, last week you visited the occupied areas. As far as I understand, there is one point close to Olenivka where there is no mobile communication. What are the reasons why the security guarantees are not provided, or security guarantees are provided and in the close future we are going to expect some restoration of the mobile communication there?
Thank you. First of all, just for a recollection, the Special Monitoring Mission has facilitated the repair of a fiber optic cable in the Luhansk region, where the communication was also not available any longer in areas beyond government control and had been restored there on January 19th. In areas beyond government control in Donetsk region, indeed it is the case that the MTS Vodafone provider has no coverage there in most of the places, except for some location close to the contact line. We are unaware of the exact causes for the interruption, but what is certain is that once again the civilian population is suffering. They can't call the other side, they can't get access to information. They can't coordinate the crossing of the contact line. They can't call their friends. They can't call for help. And this in particular affects the elderly among the population who do not rely on internet-based communication tools. The SMM stands ready to facilitate dialogue should that be needed to restore GSM coverage for areas in Donetsk region beyond government control. The interest of the civilians on both sides of the contact line should be prioritized also in this subject matter. Thank you.
It seems we have no more questions for today, so thank you, Mr. Hook. Let's finish.